ask anybody's question but yours. You're an idiot. And really a disloyal person.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Disloyal Idiots podcast, here for another edition of what happens when you decide to consume Syracuse football without consulting a medical professional. I'm Christian Guzman. He's Andy Pregler, and Steve Haller will join us soon as he is done with kid duty. Andy, you have recently rediscovered water. How is it?
Look, it is not my favorite thing in the world to discover that Las Vegas is in the middle of a desert. They do not give you water. They don't just have water everywhere. They prefer to put other types of liquids into your body. And the end result is that I am now drinking literally a Syracuse Stanley full of emergency and water. So it's been a heck of a 24 hours. I landed in JFK this morning at 6 a.m. We're still riding what was arguably one of the most chaotic sporting events that I've ever been to in my life.
I've done that red eye before, Vegas to Newark for me. That's not a fun red eye.
It is so much.
Yeah.
Other different choices could have been made. But I opted to make the choices that I did because it was a lot of fun. I don't regret anything that I did. However, I would like to let everyone here know that if you were wondering how many Cuse people were in Vegas and did we all enable our worst behaviors, the answer is yes.
I was going to say, yeah.
The answer is yes. It was just so many Cuse people were taking over Vegas. It was awesome to see. I think I was mentioning this in a couple other places. I put it into the News Magician Slack channel. That stadium was 50-50. That is the first time I've been to a non-bowl game environment where it was literally 50-50 between the home crowd and the away crowd. And at one point in time, UNLV started pumping in a very dull, low bass beat when Syracuse had they were clearly trying to pump in crowd noise, because when UNLV had the ball, Syracuse fans it wasn't obviously not dome loud, but it was loud. And you could tell that there were some people in UNLV colors who were not happy about that.
Well, I did want to ask about that as well, because again, if it wasn't clearly obvious, Andy was at the game that ended in a 44-41 Syracuse victory in overtime over UNLV at Allegiant Stadium. We'll get to how that happened in a bit. But Andy, it felt like in the FS1 broadcast of that game, at least for my ears, it just didn't feel like a loud environment in general. It felt like obviously nowhere near dome levels. And I think you start to get to these points where, as a Syracuse fan, you feel spoiled by how much noise can be created by the people in the dome. Even last week in Holy Cross, when it wasn't full in the dome, there were still moments where the fans got really, really loud. And it just felt like there just wasn't the same type of energy for UNLV. Yeah, that partially it's because you got to bring in an NFL stadium that's not directly on campus and not necessarily going to draw all the students and the fans to said venue. But it just didn't feel like it had the same kind of environment that the dome has recently been bringing, especially under the new Fran Brown era.
Yeah, I think there's a couple different ways to parse that. The first is that, yes, Allegiant is an NFL stadium. It is a domed NFL stadium, and they only sat half the bowl. So you're only dealing with, half of the stadium capacity filled, which was sold out. Like there were no seats available in the lower bowl, which was awesome. What I did think was interesting about the environment there was that UNLV tried to make a pro stadium feel like a college stadium. They had fireworks that went off after every touchdown. The electronic signage was all UNLV. There was no Raiders mentioned anywhere. It really was it felt like a UNLV home game in that regard. But in general, I think what was really apparent from just walking around Vegas and then going into the stadium was that the UNLV fans who went to this game were a particular type of older fan who are maybe not as into the game as your more younger rowdy crowd was. And the Syracuse fans who were there to enjoy Syracuse football. There's I had a friend who was in the Syracuse section of 139, saw Malachi Richardson with his 2 kids in the section. John Wallace was in a suite behind me at a pregame tailgate event that I was at. Jim Boeheim was there. This was truly the Syracuse road trip of the season. And the fans who were there for Syracuse were there to make the environment as pro-Syracuse as possible. And I do think that hurt the UNLV moment, because it did. The only memory that I have that I can really compare to this was when I was a junior and Syracuse made it to the Texas Bowl. And so I was the mascot for that game. And that was, again, NRG Stadium, pro NFL stadium, even ticket allotment between Minnesota and Syracuse. And you end up in this scenario where it's really kind of dead the whole time, because you have 2 halves of a half-filled stadium. So you really only have a quarter of a stadium getting into the game at any one time. But what I will say is that, like, again, we're going to talk about this game in more detail as we go. As that game went on, it did get a little bit louder, mostly because everyone was just nervous and screaming out of anxiety on both sides of the ball.
I think we need to talk about the main reason why said anxiety was happening for Syracuse fans, because in the past couple of weeks, it's been an issue, but one you feel like you could have corrected a bit sooner. Now it's a problem, and drastic measures probably have to get started taking very, very, very soon. And that's the special teams. We talked a little bit about it on the podcast last week with Steve and I, when it's just you couldn't trust Denenberg or Jaden O to make a field goal kick. Now, O was pretty decent and rolled out for the field goal duties. We didn't get to see necessarily what the mentality would have been like in a tough situation for Fran if it was like a 4th and long in UNLV territory, and he would have to make the decision of, does he trust O/Denenberg, or if he trots out the offense once again. I don't think there was that conundrum that Fran really had to deal with in this game. But now he's got to deal with the other conundrum of, is his punt coverage going to hold up? Because that's the 3rd time this season that the punt coverage has broken through. 2 of them have been blocked. One of them has been blocked for a touchdown in this game against UNLV. And then the 3rd time, also in this game against UNLV, Stonehouse recognized the pressure, but couldn't run away fast enough from the unblocked pressure and got taken down to set up UNLV for a very easy touchdown. And you could easily say that those 2 plays really swung the game back in UNLV's favor, which made this game a lot more interesting than probably some of the numbers dictate it should have been.
Yeah, I think that there's I haven't dug into the Bill C post-game win expectancy, but I am almost 100% sure that it is going to be, Syracuse should have been the winner of this game going away. What I will say, and again, the special teams were a big part of that, because don't forget, there were also, I believe, at least one punt where UNLV was able to advance the ball about 20 yards from where the punt was initially, landed.
Yeah, the returner, I remember the returner took it all the way to the UNLV 40 after it was, like you said, between the 15 and 20, if my memory serves correctly.
Yeah, and I think that the frustrating part, if you're Fran, is that, again, like, I'm in the crowd. I have great seats behind the Syracuse bench in the 50-yard line area. And so you see almost exactly what the coaches are seeing. And on that blocked punt, everybody around me, before the ball is snapped, is saying, call a timeout. This is going to get blocked. Call a timeout. This is going to get blocked. Because
yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Sorry to jump in. I just had to say, like, I don't remember saying call a timeout. I recall saying, this looks like it's going to get blocked, and I don't know why. And then it got blocked, and I'm like, well, that's why.
Right. And it was the situation where UNLV came out in a traditional punt return look where they were guarding, where they had guys on the edges, and they saw something. I think, again, I was not necessarily the most sober person in the world there, but they saw something that caused them to immediately bunch up and exploit something along the edges there to cause the block. And I think that, again, the worrisome part here is that I don't know if they were looking for a jersey number. I don't know if they were looking for a specific protection alignment, but they got the look that they wanted and wanted to pin their ears back, which again is why I, and I think others were saying, call the timeout, because it was very clearly a UNLV had been well trained on, if Syracuse does this, then we rush. And again, UNLV is a team that I believe had a blocked punt in their game last week. Historically, under Barry Odom, has been a very good special teams a unit, especially on the punting side. And so this is the moment where, I'm going to take a step back and say, like, look, after last week, you have to be better coached on this. The common refrain that I heard in the casino floor after from Syracuse fans is that they don't want the current special teams coach to be here after the bye week. And again, I don't necessarily think it's all coaching. I think a lot of this is execution, because if you watch that play, both sides of the protection get blown up. That is just pure lack of execution on the punting side. So I don't know if the solution is you need to get different guys into the special teams unit. I don't know if the solution is you have to fundamentally change the way you punt and go to one of those more Australian rugby kind of setups where we're rolling out either left or right. But something needs to fundamentally change here, because it was always apparent that punt was going to go sideways immediately off the snap. And if people in the stands can realize it, you can coach up a bunch of 19 and 20-year-olds to recognize whatever that key is and then take advantage of it.
It's so tough, I think, from our perspective as well, because, when Steve gets here, we might be able to ask his perspective about this, because for us two, we're not guys who have played football. We're football fans, but we haven't played football, which means that especially when it comes to special teams, we don't understand the intricacies of what makes special teams click and not. And that's actually something right now that Syracuse needs to figure out, is what is going to make the thing that locks up this special teams unit and actually makes it the good old Dino Babers quote, a well-coached special teams unit. Because it feels like, again, like we keep on mentioning, that's the biggest phase of the game where it felt like Syracuse dropped a lot of points, and maybe not directly points, but some of them definitely were, because it set up UNLV in very easy and manageable situations. Not only that, like you said, as the game got more tense, it brought the UNLV supporters into the game. And because we went off once again, and this is something we can maybe get onto if we're wrapping up the special teams. Once again, this is another game where Syracuse started off with a great lead and a great first quarter, a dominant first quarter. But then immediately, the second quarter looked dreadful and woeful. And Syracuse cannot afford to have that happen against better competition.
Yeah, I think it's tough, because when you're under a new coach, inconsistencies are almost expected. Like, I think people forget about how under a new coach, especially a first-time head coach, inconsistencies are part of the learning curve here, because coaching consistency is the hardest part of the job. Just ask Babers about that.
Yeah.
And you're now in a situation where Fran has already shown that he can elevate the floor. The problem is that floor is really hard to maintain consistently. But unlike Dino, what Brown has done very well is he's maintained the peaks. Like, we'll get into the good of this game. Again, Syracuse won 44-41 here. But under Fran, we have seen week to week consistently the things that are good continue to be good. It's more a matter of, like, how do you raise the floor on the things that Syracuse is not as strong on? And how do you marginally improve the little things week to week, like man-to-man coverage on the outside, like overall linebacker coverage over middle deep routes over the middle of the field? Those are all things that we have not seen be consistent, and we have seen teams exploit multiple times and Syracuse be unable to make those adjustments in game. That is obviously worrisome, but that's also kind of par for the course with a new coach and a new staff who is mostly all doing this for the first time in their respective roles.
It'll be interesting to see how that also changes when it comes to, again, the second quarter stuff. I mean, I think it's okay. It's fine that hey, guess what? You got this out now in your system. It's against, two of, no disrespect to UNLV, but two of your weaker opponents on the schedule. It's Holy Cross and UNLV. This is one of the reasons why, some of the fans early on, once first Frank got hired, this was one of the big sticking points of, okay, we know he's a good recruiter. Can he coach? Can he actually, adapt to the situations when it requires? And right now, it feels like it's taking a bit of time for that to happen. Because it feels like, coming out of halftime locker rooms, Syracuse have actually looked pretty good. But those mid-half adjustments just haven't quite been there yet. I mean, we also saw it in the Georgia Tech game. Yes, Syracuse went into a bit of a strategy change for the Georgia Tech game in the fourth quarter. But that's when Georgia Tech started to make its comeback. And yes, the onside kick getting recovered was not great. But at the same time, given how the Syracuse defense had played during that game, you expected them to hold up a bit more against that Georgia Tech offense in the fourth quarter and not make that game as close. And now we're starting to see that in more of these games where Syracuse should have the momentum and should be way too hard to put away or even come back, I should say. And Syracuse should be putting these games away with more efficiency. But the fact that you need Kyle McCord and LaQuint Allen and Orlando Gadsden to have these huge saving games, essentially like elite games, in order to win what should have been a comfortable game is something that needs to be, addressed and worked on.
Yeah, and I think that this is what made this game so fun to be at, was that the best players on both sides continually stepped up and made plays. McCord and Gadsden, obviously, for Syracuse on the offensive side of the ball, but on the defensive side of the ball, Elijah Clark had one of his best games that I have seen in a Syracuse uniform for him. He was making some very clutch plays, both in run prevention on the edges and in pass protection. Meanwhile, on the UNLV side of the ball, we saw Haj Malik Williams look every bit of the quarterback who should be getting paid getting paid $300,000 as opposed to who allegedly was going to be making that. But Jackson Woodard on the defensive side of the ball, obviously he had just was involved with every single big defensive stop that UNLV had. And I just kept, my friends and I, we made the joke, but like anytime UNLV had a big play, it was a guy with a C on his chest. And I think you saw in that second quarter, the Syracuse guys who would have a C on their chest were a bit more invisible. Kyle, there was a commitment from Syracuse to attempt to run the ball a bit more. It wasn't working very well. Allen obviously got banged up a bit and was out of the game for a bit, and that led to a reliance on Yassine Willis, which we'll get to in a minute here. But it is a bit worrisome that Kyle McCord dropped back 65 times in this game. It was even more concerning that Syracuse dropped back 65 times in this game. And it was less about UNLV's run defense being good and more about that being the best way for Syracuse to ensure that the offense was moving as efficiently as possible.
Now we get into the really, really difficult discussion with Syracuse's offense. I think you know where I'm going with this, Andy. Run pass split.
Yeah.
Because that's where it all comes down to, because this is where so many people are having arguments about online. So many questions are being asked about it in press conferences with Fran Brown and some of the other players as well. I mean, it's still it was still a 2-to-1 ratio in run pass. 63 attempts for McCord and 33 total rushes. That's obviously not accounting for, tackles behind losses for plays and stuff like that. It's LeQuint Allen had a good game. I'll give him that. The problem is he didn't have enough of a good game to warrant pushing the ball across more in early down situations on the run. Like he was great in the red zone, obviously. He had 4 touchdowns. That was great. But in the early and midfield, there was not enough shown from not only him, but the run game in general that I think could give Syracuse the confidence to say, hey, let's give it to these guys on first down or second down. And also, once again, I mentioned this in my thing and what to watch. This becomes so much easier if Syracuse stays ahead. Once Syracuse dropped behind, you go to the typical thing that you know you do well. In Syracuse's case, it's pass the ball. Once you get ahead, we can vary it up a bit more.
It's really frustrating because it really is a situation where the offense is just not effective if Syracuse is relying on the run game. And I know that runs counter to what Fran has said, but based off of what we've seen, we are looking at a run defense that is just unable to consistently do much of anything. So when we take a look at, I'm taking a look at what Syracuse is doing this year on offense. You can go and take a look at college football data for these stats. But Syracuse is only getting about, this is not great.
No.
Sorry.
Oh no.
Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna just take a look at some run stats here that are just really not going to be pretty. And Steve, you showed up for the what the heck's wrong with Syracuse's rushing offense part. So
this is rush offense or rush defense?
Both right here.
Oh God! Oh no!
I was going to say rush offense seemed to find something
in the red zone. This is what I just talked about earlier. In the red zone, yes, and an open field before that, not quite.
Yeah, and so if you look here, the rush offense and the rush defense are roughly about the same rank here. And you see that this is one of the areas that I think is really obvious of why the defense is struggling and why the offense is struggling. We're getting less than 1 yard per open field rush, which essentially means that our running backs do not have any kind of consistent, untouched lane in the open field to run through. And again, when you take a look at the line yards per rush here, it's not really, the defense and the offense are roughly about the same, where the line is essentially getting about 3 yards per play here. So our offensive line is able to push 3 yards up. And defense is getting pushed.
What you're looking for.
Right. It's these things that I'm not loving where, again, our offense, it just seems like, again, I think people can see this. We're not necessarily and again, you see that this is the part here that matters. When we pass the ball, we're very, very, very good at making sure that when we pass the ball, we are consistently adding value to the offense. Rushing the ball basically does next to nothing in terms of improving the game for Syracuse. So we're now in this awkward position where the offense needs to pass the ball to do anything positive, and they're only running the ball to keep the defense honest, which, again, I shouldn't say again here, but this is something I talk about a lot on my other podcast with Level Up on Fans First Sports Network. When we talk about Colorado. Colorado is an air raid team that's not trying to give any kind of illusion that they're running the ball, and it's why their offense is so inconsistent. Syracuse is an air raid team in execution that is trying to not be an air raid team. And I'm not saying that it's...
Which is why I switched to the air raid playbook in EA College Football 25.
Look, if the playbook fits, like, I don't know what else to tell you, man. Like, this is a team that these are the kinds of numbers that you'd see out of a Mike Leach offense. And I don't necessarily think that this is what Syracuse is setting out with the intention of doing, because we can look at how the play calling has evolved since week 1 here. But what's happening in actuality is that Syracuse is just unable to get any kind of positive EV when they run the ball. And a lot of it is that the scheme itself is not necessarily putting our running backs in position to take advantage of good blocking when it does happen. But we saw, again, like, not to be all doom and gloom, Syracuse won this game here. What we saw when the running game was successful, right? Allen and Yassine were able to get into open space and then cook. And a lot of it was off of the edges and not up the middle. And I do think that is partially like what we needed to be more aggressive doing when we play a team like UNLV, where you should be able to dominate and set better edges because they're just not as big and strong as you.
Right. And the thing is, though, hi, offensive line talk incoming. This is something we've seen for the last 4 to 5 weeks at this point. Holy Cross was what it was. In general, the outside rush has been there, and yet we haven't utilized it. And we've always looked better running off tackle. The other thing,
We've said that for the past 8 years.
well, yeah, but like with the staff in particular, if what we're seeing is that the edge is there, take the edge, and guess what? It's gonna open the middle up, because if they have to be honest on the outside, you're not going to be able to shade A gaps with everybody and like have your middle backers just sitting in the hole. Like, if we can establish an outside run game, it opens up the inside run game. Like, it doesn't, not everything has to be a diver of power, right? Like, right up the middle. I guess power off that, whatever. I was cooking. It's fine. Just let me go. But like, not everything has to be A gap. Not everything has to be inside B gap. Like, just utilize the field to open the rest of the field. And they're trying to, quote unquote, use the run to open up the pass, but it's not there. And if they're doing that, use the effective run to open up other parts of the run, which can make the whole thing work a little better. If that makes any sense.
You know what also is really, really interesting for you, Steve, as well, as the offensive line guy? When I look at PFF's like rushing direction stats right now, almost every single one of them is to the left side of the line. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 or 7 that went around to the left.
Yep.
That's mainly by the Quinn Allen. I mean, Yassine Willis had 1 rush to the left. 1 rush to the right, excuse me.
Right.
So, like, it's also very, very interesting. Because,
well,
you've seen it as well. Like, you've brought this up as well. The right side of the line, once again, is a weakness for Syracuse. There are times where
I don't believe Savion Washington is especially pass blocking. In the run game, he's nowhere near as effective.
Yeah.
The run offense I feel like Demetrius Witherspoon in pass defense or pass pro is worse than Savion Washington. However, on the run side of the ball, that flops significantly.
So, PFF wise, Washington actually didn't have a great game against UNLV. Pass block 51, run block 59.2.
Okay.
Witherspoon actually pass block 77 and run block 86.
Well, and again, I will always stress this, like, these grades are what they are. But a good chunk of how Savion Washington looks is due to how Mark Petrie looks. And a good chunk of how Demetrius Witherspoon looks is due to how Jacob Bradford looks. Like, the offensive line is so intertwined that those grades can't be on an ice. Like, they're working together through this whole thing. So I get it, and it's true. Like but I didn't see anything amazing out of Washington this game, but I don't know if I noticed anything horrible out of them either. So to be under the Mendoza line in both of them is mildly a surprise to me.
I didn't think that the offensive line was particularly troubling in this game. What I did think that UNLV did, and we've seen a couple of times here, is really do a good job of collapsing the pocket and forcing Kyle McCord to step up and make throws over the middle where he is, stepping into pressure, or at least stepping into where there would theoretically be pressure. And to be honest, McCord has looked really good when he makes those throws this year. And I think what's been frustrating is that when the Syracuse passing game has petered out and has struggled, it's because McCord is trying to roll out away from pressure. He knows it's coming, and his instinct is the easiest way for me to avoid pressure is to get out of the pocket. And again, he had another great run this week where he basically turned what would have been a drive ender into a really clutch moment and points for Syracuse. But for the most part, teams have kind of realized that that's what he wants to do. And so they'll collapse the pocket from the outside rather than trying to attack him from the inside and force him to roll out, which was the book on him coming into the year. I think that evolution has been interesting, but I do think it's a bit of a testament to the offensive line at being a lot better in pass protect than in years past. That being said, like, the run blocking is still not something I'm particularly in love with. Again, we talked about the playmakers on UNLV here earlier, but when we're looking at like Jackson Woodard, that guy was just exploding through gaps every single time. And there was really little, again, part of that is just amazing execution on his part. He's a senior captain. He's the leader of that defense. But part of it was also the scheming around that. We just did not do a great job, and we haven't done a great job this year scheming up a running attack that does anything to really stop those second level attackers that are coming in and attacking, the preferred gap of the run game. And again, I don't know how much of that is execution. I don't know how much of that is scheme, but it's been consistent all 5 weeks of the season so far.
Steve,
Steve,
Point of order on Woodard. He is all of those things, but he is also owned by LaQuinta.
Yes. And Steve had to drop off for that. LOL.
That's really funny.
That's a literal mic drop from Steve right there.
That was really funny. Holy moly.
Podcast, yeah. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. My dog is also going insane in the background. Yeah. I apologize. I'm probably going to have to run away again, but this is what happens when you're solo parenting and podcasting. So,
before you run away again, Steve, because you're here and you're a former offensive lineman and a former football player, you can provide this perspective on what Andy and I started off the podcast with.
Okay.
The punt coverage.
Coming in?
How much of this is on the punt blocking versus just in general, execution or scheme when it comes to the punt blocking issues that we're seeing so far?
We have a punt team?
You make great points.
I saw Jack Stonehouse back there trying to run for his life with nothing in front of him.
Yeah. Jack Stonehouse was a gazelle in the Serengeti.
That training with Riley Dixon did help. Not in the sense we thought it was going to, but in that sense. So, no, there's a lot of problems going on there. I don't have a good enough gauge to be able to give an answer on that. Part of me wants to go back and look at those way too many times, and I don't know if I'll have the time this week. And hopefully those are short up by next week. But it seems like we're just rolling. It's like we're playing D&D, and we're just rolling the dice and seeing which facet of special teams is going to screw us the most this week.
Nap one.
Yeah, I don't love that.
Nap one. No.
Yep. Yeah. So it's been a joy. I don't know how or what we're going to figure that out, but hopefully we do. for full disclosure, I watched the opening salvo of this game, and then
much like last week, thought this game was over, and then realized, holy shit, it's not.
Well, no, I was busy doing a bunch of things this weekend. Didn't even get to like commit to watching the whole game that night. For how I got it live, it was like the first drive and a half. Like I had to turn it off like midway through the second Syracuse drive, and then I picked it back up when it was 31-31 or 30-30, whatever it was.
That's a hell of a time to pick it back up.
Oh, there was like at one point I looked at my phone and Syracuse was up 30-20, and then I refreshed and it was tied, and I was like, what in the, like, Syracuse had the ball, we were up, and then it was tied, and I'm like, what the hell just happened? That was the second block punt. And I was like, I don't, this game is beyond stupid. And then we finally were able to turn it on at like 11:30, 12-ish. Next thing I know, I'm up till 1 watching the damn thing, and it worked out well. But yeah, it was a ride. Let's put it that way. Special teams is important. It is a third facet of the game. We've talked about this many times for many years at this point.
Like I brought up at the top of the pod, it goes back to the great Dino Babers quote: "We will have a special teams that is well coached."
Yeah. Well, we have a special teams, and it is coached. You're muted, Pregs.
Yeah. I was gonna say I'm not sure it's coached. I'm not actually sure it's coached.
I think there's someone we're paying to coach it. I don't know what's happening. We're paying someone to coach it. Right.
You know what we're also paying for, or you know what someone is paying for this podcast? Home Field Apparel. Thank you very much. We are all rocking a different facet of what could be combined to create the Home Field Syracuse Voltron. Steve wearing the vintage Syracuse t-shirt. Christian wearing the vintage Syracuse bomber. I'm wearing the vintage Syracuse dad hat. 3 different Syracuse logos. Combine them to create the ultimate Syracuse outfit over at homefieldapparel.com, your one-stop shop for all things vintage college football apparel. Make sure you use promo code NUNES24, NUNES24, for 15% off your first order at homefieldapparel.com to get in on this sweet Syracuse vintage action. That is another thing that I noticed around Vegas. I made sure to call out every single person that I saw on the Vegas floor who was wearing a Home Field Apparel t-shirt that was Syracuse. I went over to them and I said, "Home Field, go Cuse." And I got I said that a lot of times. So we are proliferating the Syracuse fandom. I think I saw lots of different Syracuse t-shirts. The one that Steve had was obviously a big favorite. Saw a Vita the Goat one. That was a big favorite one. There's, I think that this is a situation where, we know how great Connor and the team make the gear. So it's fantastic. We love the support. Congratulations to Indiana, one of our first bowl eligible teams of the season, sitting at 6-0. They're ranked in the top 15. Congratulations to the Indiana Hoosiers and to Connor and the entire Home Field Apparel team.
So you mentioned, like, Steve has the Syracuse t-shirt. I've got the bomber jacket. You've got the dad hat. What happens when we combine all 3 of those and then add the secret ingredient, Chemical X?
Oh, you mean the joggers?
Yeah. I was trying to make a Powerpuff Girls joke, but I think I got it wrong. The intro.
I mean, I honestly haven't watched Powerpuff Girls in a very long time, so I am a little.
This is
little
where
rusty
I
there.
start to show my age as well.
Yes. But I'm here for it. I respect it. Let's do it. We've talked about a lot of different things in this podcast about like what obviously Syracuse could potentially do better moving forward.
I do want to do one more thing on that before we get to, the good of
like
this
what
game
we're
as
actually
well.
good at.
Yeah. Because it will tie in nicely to, like, where is Syracuse like good/bad or things like that. Kyle McCord over the middle is really hit or miss at times.
Right.
Like, he looks incredible throwing to the sidelines. It's like a reverse
Yes.
Garrett Schrader, because Schrader was great throwing over the middle, but woeful throwing to the sidelines. There are times where McCord is like overthrowing guys over the middle, throwing behind guys in the middle, in some key situations as well. And it's happening far more times that should happen for a player of his capability.
I mean, I will push back a little bit on that, only because I don't necessarily think his capability is more than that. This is the part where I get to, again, I'm not going to say I told you so. What I am going to say is that there were reasons that I didn't think that Kyle McCord was going to be a savior for Syracuse. Hashtag savior Kyle, savior McCord. There were reasons I didn't think that, and a lot of it came to do with the fact that at Ohio State, he was asked almost exclusively to be throwing over the middle. Because again, they run a very pro-style system, and when you have a Marvin Harrison Jr., guess what you get to do a lot? Throw over the middle. And so Kyle McCord struggled in that kind of a system, and I do think that Syracuse has done a very excellent job of giving him opportunities to make the throws that he's good at, to make those over the middle throws easier. But I do think that this is just kind of the book on McCord, where he is not an elite quarterback. He is a very good quarterback, and throwing over the middle is the hardest part of the game. It is the hardest skill to have. It is why Tom Brady is kind of, this elite quarterback when you look at the modern scheme. And it's because they've mastered that throw over the middle. But it's the last thing that you have to master. It's the hardest thing to do. I just don't think that McCord was ever going to have that ceiling. And so what you need to do, and what I did like about this game, was that when, again, it didn't happen every time, but a lot of the time, we finally got back to having the big bodies over the middle, as opposed to trying to hit Trebor Pena or one of the smaller, speedy guys over the middle, where that throw needs to be far more precise versus throw it in the general area and let big body go and create space and bring that ball in.
Big body? We have that guy?
You have that guy when UNLV's defense decides to not game plan for said guy.
I don't know. I'm trying to figure out whether it was something our guys did or just a complete ineptitude by UNLV as to how or why Aranda Gadsden was as goddamn wide open as he was the entire game. Because I did go back and watch the game the next day, because that's how my brain works, and I'm not right in the head. How does one leave a giant tight end who's an NFL target as, never mind, I'm a Bills fan, I understand this. Okay. Yep. I just had a trip in my head, but what I was going to say is
Steve just real time suffered Nom flashbacks.
It's like, how do you leave someone who is going to be the primary target and getting the ball as wide open as you do? Apparently, Travis Kelce can also do that, but Aranda Gadsden is the current college equivalent of that for Syracuse. So
you do what the Bills did that fateful day. You play zone.
Right, soft zone, and this is what happens. Big guy finds seam and catches ball.
Because that was the two types of defenses that Syracuse played, that UNLV played against Gadsden. It was either man or man, single man coverage, which, first of all, as we showed, as Stanford and Holy Cross showed, having an extra man makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
But also, it was either playing zone. And what was one of the big things we said when Gadsden initially broke out in that initial 2022 season? He is one of the best players at finding the soft spot in the zone and sitting in that spot.
100%. And he will settle there. And if you're not playing man and a half on him, you're going to be regretting it, much like UNLV did. They didn't find him down in, I guess I didn't look when we were down in the red zone whether or not they shifted and we're just giving him that space kind of in the open field and tightened down when they got in the red zone. Maybe that was something. I don't know.
Andy and I both had the same reaction.
You're maybe, but it doesn't none of it makes sense.
No, none of it. I'm happy for it. Gadsden needed it before the game. One of the guys that I was going to the game with, shout out Chari, was saying that he really hoped that the first drive featured a over the middle throw to Gadsden just to get him in rhythm, because it did feel like last couple of weeks, we've seen that if Gadsden doesn't get involved early, he tends to not get involved at all. And that's exactly what happened. And it obviously worked out well for us as UNLV continued to forget to cover him. And it was just the part that got me was like every time we got into the red zone, again, we're going to talk about the LaQuint Allen play at the end. We are going to talk about the LaQuint Allen play, but it just seemed as if
Yes,
fair. It just seemed like the red zone defense for UNLV was so different than the rest of their defense, which again, not complaining about here, since it benefited Syracuse, but it was very odd. And again, I'm not sure yet if this is a feature or a bug on the Syracuse side.
it sounds like you're trying to install a patch on the Syracuse offense.
I mean, look, this was not a great. Yeah, this was not a great running performance by Syracuse, but it did feel like we at least had gotten a patch out there that solved some of the biggest issues. Which
the ball moved forward.
Yes,
it was more than can be said for most of the last couple of games on the ground.
Yes, and I think part of that is, again, to Christian's point, I don't know if this is where you want to transition to, Christian, but I'm going to transition to this point. One of the things that I really liked was getting Willis involved early. 2 reasons. One, coming into this game, only 2 running backs had more percentage of their team snaps at halfback than LaQuint Allen, one of them being a guy named Ashton Genty, who you might have heard at Boise State, who is having a borderline break the internet, break the sport type of season. Not saying that LaQuint Allen doesn't deserve that many reps. It just is like we came into the year going, this is a pretty crowded running back room, and the snaps were not being distributed like so. Obviously, there's an injury to Nixon in there right now, but you still had other bodies. I think we saw here how much more important it is, one, to keep the legs as fresh as possible for the guys that are actually going to be involved in the game, because it allows you to later in a game, I don't know, maybe get that extra bit of oomph in your lower body so that you don't go down when attacked in the hole. The other part of it is UNLV really did not they were enjoying the physical part of this game, but in the 3rd and 4th quarter, you started to see them not enjoy being hit over the middle or hit in the middle by Willis and Allen as much as they did in the 1st and the 2nd quarter. Like there was that actual wearing them down that you hear talked about as a cliche, but was true because you now had this 2-headed monster that was very content to run over whoever was in the gap.
For the record, that may also have been because we ran 96 plays. People get tired.
Air raid. We're running an air raid.
The thing was, there was one point where we had run like 70 plays to their 30 because of the 2 block punts. It really, it changes the whole like we turned this on and we're again, like I didn't see the middle of the game live. And we turn it on, we see all these stats popping up of like us tripling them up on offense, and time of possession is like ridiculously skewed. And we're like, how the hell did this happen? Because they never went back to the special teams faux pas. Like the crew at that point in the game didn't ever, even going in and out of timeouts, flash back to those messes. So we had no clue as to what was going on. We're just like, how is this so lopsided for Syracuse, and yet we're tied, or we were losing at one point?
Andy, you weren't here. FS1 broadcast had a day.
This was a game that I was very happy. Very early on, I got some texts that made me very happy that I was at the game and not watching the game.
I mean, Steve, you can attest to it. The camera work was indeed camera work.
They showed things. Things were shown on the television. The what was it? Oh god, there was one play that I remember they showed the replay of like 4 times, and none of the replays showed what happened.
Yeah,
I was like, how? how do you do this? But I guess you don't bring your
magic is how you do it.
Sports showcase Friday night game.
I mean, I do think that one of the interesting things about this game is that no one expected it to be the game that was, and so like a great example of
Sickos committee, yes. Mm-hmm.
I mean, smart college football people knew that this was going to be one of the games of the week, and I'm very happy that it did not. That the Sickos continue to look smart. But I don't know if they showed him on TV. But Flava Flav was there.
Yes, he did.
Kenny Mayne was there, who apparently was a UNLV football player at one point in time. Did not know that.
Did not know that.
Yeah. So it was an event in Vegas, which is again hilarious that a Syracuse football game was like an event happening in Las Vegas, Nevada. I can't fathom that.
I don't know if it was the positioning of the mics or something else, but you guys sounded good on TV for the record. There was a notable Cuse contingent down there.
Again, I just looked online. I have the box score up just to have the stats on hand. It's 31,000. I would almost guarantee it's 17,000 UNLV, 14,000 Syracuse, maybe the opposite split. I had heard a rumor
right from here, that at a great Southwest California fan base, like that really adds to showing up in UNLV.
I can say this. I could not confirm it with an actual athletic department source. I had heard that they were expecting 10,000 Syracuse fans for this game. Yeah. Which again, not all of them were in the Syracuse section, but they were all in this one particular section behind the Syracuse bench. It was loud and it was great. But I think the loudest cheer, aside from the end, which was just absolute mayhem, that interception and then aforementioned touchdown that happened was probably the craziest series that I have ever witnessed in person, because as soon as the interception happened,
that was the one
that
I was talking about, that no camera guy had at all. They played the replay of it, and I was like, what the because that was right when we turned it on. We're like, what just happened?
The interception happens and they run to the sidelines, and we immediately go like, did they bring the orange juice and shots? And lo and behold, you see one of the trainers like pull out from a cooler, like a little red Solo Cup shot glass, and pull out the orange juice. And they did the thing like they do at a home game, because there were so many Syracuse fans there. They got up on a bench in front of the Syracuse fan section and started like doing all the cheers and getting everybody hyped. But as he was taking the shot of orange juice, Willis was scoring a touchdown, and then everybody went nuts. So it looked like the entire Syracuse section was celebrating this guy taking his turnover shot, when in reality we were all celebrating that and the fact that Willis, broke contain and was able to get a big touchdown there. Definitely a highlight of the game, but not the best running back highlight of the game by far.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're talking positive stuff, but do you want to talk tackling?
What, again, much like our special teams, did we have tackling?
Now, there was some content about this online.
Did you see the PFF grade for tackling?
I mean, I have. Steve hasn't. I'll let him.
I pulled them up because I figured you guys had already gone through the PFF stuff, so I took a gander.
Like, how much is this between just bad form, bad, execution of actually making said tackle, or how much is it bad routes, bad positioning?
Pursuit angles are still abysmal.
Yes.
There is a lot of early contact that is very army and not body, and that worries me. And that's definitely the technical description of it. But I think you guys both know what I'm talking about. Like, there's not a lot of, it's a lot of flailing.
The first multiple times when they had the bad snaps and you're like, bring the quarterback down, they were able to make a play happen because they were going for arm tackles instead of body tackles. And that's on the quarterback. Like, come on, guys. Like, that to me is inexcusable, because I don't know. It's frustrating for me at this point, because I don't think that at this point it's going to change, which just means that Syracuse is going to be a bad tackling team, which means that we at least have one more stupid loss on the schedule. We probably had one more stupid loss on the schedule anyways, but
I am so ready for us to lose to UConn.
No, I'm going to be there with a bunch of scouts. Don't do that to me.
Yeah, I'm going to be there too with some friends. So also, I broke the curse.
It will be a
also,
great
the curse.
It'll be a great life lesson for the scouts. Kids, life's not fair. Also, the state of Connecticut needs to burn.
Yeah.
Kids, Syracuse football will disappoint you more than anything else in life.
Yeah, Pregs, I forgot after the Stanford game, the streak was still alive, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I had still not seen a Syracuse victory in person, but that has changed now. Thank you, thank you again, LaQuint Allen. I need to.
But now you still have not seen one in the Dome.
I still have not seen a Syracuse win in the Dome as an alumni on the football team.
Not wearing a giant furry suit.
Yes. As that's the big caveat here. This is I think I could talk about this game for the next 3 hours just because it was like an absolutely insane. Again, we won 44-41 in overtime. Honest question here.
What did that Bill C expected win probability come out to?
Syracuse 25%.
Holy.
So when we have again the Stanford game, Syracuse was expected to win 65% of the time. So again, it's not a stupid loss, but that's more of a coin flip loss. This was a stupid win, which again means that we are due for stupid loss, like just the laws of averages and the way this works.
But the thing is, I would assume the way Bill C, the way that's all equated, especially through the course of the game, if you have two massive screw ups on special teams like that, there should be a significantly less than 25% chance that you win that game.
Correct.
If
you
looked at the offensive and defensive stat lines, like if you're not taking advanced metrics into it and you're not taking the third phase of the game into it, Syracuse runs away with this game.
Yes, and it's
as soon as you put that in there, it's like, what just happened?
It's all. I believe it's also a situation where Syracuse's, again, the rushing attack was not super value add, and UNLV's offense was far more consistent. But again, they only really had the one mistake. And so again, when we're talking about these different things, like McCord was incredibly lucky that he didn't have a pick on what ended up being a very important touchdown in the first half. Again, sometimes things just break your way. And I think, again, I think that's actually a really nice segue, Steve and Christian, because when this game was trekking towards overtime, my thought was, if we play more of this game, Syracuse will not win this game, which is a great indication of like the feel of post-game win expectancy of like, if we're going to continue to do this, if we're going to give more cracks at the apple, is my team actually the better team here?
See, now that's funny because as we were trending towards overtime, my brain was thinking, if we get to overtime, we're winning this game. Strictly on the fact that it took a bunch of the special teams aspects out. Jaden O looked fine. there was like the two main facets of the game, Syracuse was favored in at that point. Like we had looked better than them. So in my brain, I'm like, if we can get to the point where we take out the in between shit, we're fine.
I think Andy pointed this out in our Slack. It was Dom. Dom pointed this out on our Slack. On the bright side, we have literally no reason to punt for the rest of this one.
Oh no, if it's inside the 45, like we're going.
I'm just at that point. I'm surprised that Frank kept the punters in pads. Like I thought he was just gonna be like, all right, we got. I mean, the team flew out immediately after the game. Like, look, go hit the showers, go get comfortable, kid. Like, this is not this is not a fun flight back home. Even if we win, like it's still 5 hours, and with the time change and everything. So, which also shout out, got this from somebody close to the program. Fran gave the team all of Saturday off as recovery, and then scheduled 9 a.m. Team workouts this morning.
Just incredible. Absolutely incredible.
And that, yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, I love Fran so much.
It's-
Which also,
it's like the
sorry,
it's really funny just thinking about how the opposite of that works. If you guys remember hockey wise, the David Ayers game in 2020 between Carolina and Toronto, where the e-bug goes in and Toronto cancels practice the next day, and you're like, what are you guys doing? You just lost to the emergency backup goalie.
Yep.
Don't you think you should practice after that game?
Oh yeah.
yeah.
No, it's
That
so having been on the wrong side of that, I think Fran did that partly because there's a quick turnaround on this, not in the sense that it is a quick turnaround to another Friday game or something. Like there's an extra day in there, but you're on the road again.
Yeah.
And
Good old Carter Finley. Holy shit.
probably what, Thursday down to Carter Finley?
Yeah.
So
They were Wednesday in Vegas, so you would assume
Yeah.
Thursday in Carter Finley. Even though it's a shorter travel distance, you would assume you'd keep the itinerary the same.
right. So that 9:30 is a don't screw around Saturday night. Like do your thing. We're gonna give you 9:30 because I had coaches schedule the 7 a.m. workout, which that was always a great, happy, fun time.
Yeah, 9 o'clock's actually like a really good time.
Oh yeah, it's like okay, even if you went out for a bit, you're a college student, you could have recovered by then.
Yeah.
Um,
It was amazing. It was amazing in our undergrad days, and you can attest to this as well, since we've got the recency bias. The stark and mundane difference between an 8 o'clock and a 9 o'clock class.
I had 6 a.m. workouts every day, buddy. That is
Right.
That you
Right.
which also your
guy,
body suddenly learns-
guy in fursuit. I forgot. Yes.
Yes. But also on that note, like talking about the stuff that Fran does that we can all love. Pre-game, we saw it was shared in our Slack. Fran doing the drills.
Holy yeah.
Which also Fran wearing the tightest pair of white khakis that I have ever seen in my entire life, with the tightest black script Syracuse muscle shirt that I have ever seen. Again, absolutely love that in Vegas. That is a vibe. I'm here for it, Fran. When the team came out for warmups, like we got into the stadium as soon as it opened. One, because Vegas is so hot, you do not want to like mess around tailgating there. You just go straight in. So we got in when Syracuse had like what came out as a team for the organized warmups. A few players were late coming out of the tunnel. Fran is sprinting from the far side of the field to the tunnel that Syracuse was coming out of, the visitors tunnel, which was the opposite corner. Fran is sprinting down there, screaming at them to hurry up. He's doing the this thing to them. And
Yeah, like if
they're running past
that tunnel with a trainer, you get your ass in gear.
and Fran is just, and like, I don't know who the last player was. I didn't look and see who it was, but whoever the last player is, Fran is next to him as he's jogging into his position. Fran is just screaming at him. And I don't necessarily think it was for the benefit. I don't necessarily think that was for that particular player. I think it was for the rest of the team who is watching their head coach jacked up, screaming at the last guy who's coming in late, and then is going to do defensive line drills without pads. Like I am sorry,
Parking right here, I'd assume the whole time that
But-
he's right. Yep.
Steve,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if you had to deal with this,
I can't
but
do that for my U8s, by the way. It doesn't work. the same.
because I don't know if you had to deal with this in college, but the Jason Kelsey story that he tells on New Heights is incredible about what happens if they were late for practice in Cincinnati. If you were late in practice for Cincinnati, the entire team had to do stadiums.
Yeah, there were a couple things like that where it was like we had gassers at the end of practice, which were so you line up on one sideline and across the field and back is one.
Mhm.
And they had you don't think that's that hard
That's
until you're at the end of a practice and running those gassers and you're just like, my body wants to die. There is no worse thing in the world.
it's a pacer test with no beep at the end, and that already just sounds horrific.
Yep.
But I just remember Jason Kelsey on the New Heights podcast literally saying he was so late to one practice that like he entered the stadium, dropped his stuff, and immediately started doing stadiums before the
Just
team
started
told them had everyone had to do them. So it's just like I can see Fran doing that at some point.
He is the one of the things that I will say about it is that being in a visiting stadium with a lot of fans who obviously a lot of them are season ticket holders at Syracuse, but a lot of them, this was, Steve, to your point, this was a lot of fans who are based out on the West Coast, a lot of LA people, a lot of Pacific Northwest people in the tech field, a lot of East Coast, New York City, Charlotte, Orlando, Atlanta hub.
To Vegas.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Very easy to make that destination happen. And this was a lot of people's first time seeing Fran like in person. And lots of people around me, as they're showing things, they're like, wait, who's that? Wait, which coach is that? And I'm like, that's Fran. And it is just watching the realization and seeing the love that, like, again, a lot of people who made this trip fall into a certain demographic who like a hard-nosed coach in all forms. Fran is appealing to that very particular set of fans. But again, the fact that you hear the team talk about him and the fact that they love him as much as they do for this, I think speaks volumes as to that delicate balance that Fran is able to do, where he's holding everyone accountable and he shows them that he is just as invested, and he doesn't ask of them anything that he wouldn't ask of himself if he was in that position.
There's the big thing too, is you see the passion and the will for him to do what he needs to do, and also get these kids to come along with him. And that is just like, he's one of those head coaches you would run through a wall for, from all we can tell at this point. I don't want to, build a statue of the guy until we've seen a full season of him, at least, let alone, a decade of him as the Syracuse head coach and bring us to new heights and, all those things he promised that he would do, right? No. But everything he's done and said seems to be putting this program in the direction that we wanted to go, with the buy-in from the players, which are not necessarily all of his, even though we had, third most turnover in D1, or at least the P4. But he's getting these kids to buy into this system that he's selling. And that's its own, its own animal as far as how you can do that for kids that are, I don't know. Yeah. Christian, I see the finger.
Yeah. Because I know we're running out of time.
Rest in peace, finger wag.
Because we're running out of time, and I want to get this in because it really ties into like the culmination of this point before we end this podcast. Because if you want evidence on how much buy-in Fran is having, not just from his players, but from what he's good at, the recruiting.
Yeah.
Fran reflipped a recruit.
Uh-huh. I forgot we haven't talked about that, have we?
But that's because it happened like an hour after we finished last week's podcast.
Yes. Okay. That's why I was like, did that really happen this week? Oh, yeah.
Yes.
That did happen this week.
Fran reflipped Demetrius Samuels Jr., who was one of the Florida prospects from 2026 that had flipped to a Florida school, in this case, Florida. He reclassified to 2025 in order to make that flip. And recently just reflipped back to Syracuse after a visit during the Holy Cross game.
Mm-hmm. And maintain that 2025 eligibility.
Indeed did. He now is the highest rated recruit in the class.
Funny how that happens.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll take it.
Yeah. Because one of Steve's sticking points has been with his 2026 recruits. The 26 recruits that's Syracuse got early were like, let's not hold our breath. This is a while out, and we already saw what happened. But now, this one looks a bit more solid.
Right. I mean, all three of them flipped, right?
We still have the guy from Pennsylvania.
Okay.
The running back from Pennsylvania.
So two of the three flipped.
Yes.
But at the same time, if Samuels is flipping back as a 25, that's, okay, we lost one recruit. We ended up taking the circuitous route to get another one back. maybe this is something that could build in the future.
Yeah, don't say anything yet because Isaiah Williams is committed to Florida State, and we've already seen how that is going.
Yeah,
there's still lots of time here. But unlike lots of time, we are, as alluded to, we are at about a little bit over an hour. Thank you for everybody who have stuck with us as we talk about an amazing Syracuse win. Hopefully we can do the same thing next week. A reminder, another primetime game next week, 8 p.m. Eastern, as Syracuse takes on NC State on the ACC network. So another primetime game for Cuse. I'm not upset about it. You shouldn't be upset about it either. You also shouldn't be upset about this show ending. Thank you so much. If you liked the show, make sure you like and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Helps us trick the AI into expanding the Ottoman Empire. Thank you so much if you're watching us live on Twitch. We do this every Sunday-ish at 8 p.m.-ish on twitch.tv/Disloyal Idiots. If you're watching this on newsmagician.com, whether it's podcast, whether it's the Twitch playback, we appreciate the support over there as you continue to follow us now that we're over here on Fans First Sports Network. Thank you again to our partner, Home Field Apparel, Nunes24, NUNES24 for 15% off your first order at Home Field Apparel. Thankfully, the Steelers have been in a weather delay. That weather delay is about to end. Steve, Christian, thank you so much. Go Orange.
Go Orange.
Syracuse minus 2.5 over NC State. Go Orange.
Woo!